Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us here at Adweek House. Possible day 2. Is everyone hydrating? Hopefully staying alive, making it through, hopefully learning something or meeting someone or drinking something. But thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who don't know, my name is Kendra Barnett, and I'm Adweek's senior tech reporter. And I'm delighted to be joined by a rock star panel here, who I shall introduce to you in one moment. But we have a really, really fun topic today, which is slop. You may have heard of it. You may have feelings about it. Maybe you love it. More likely you hate it. But slop was the Merriam-Webster word of the year in 2025, which is bizarre. But you've probably seen it flooding the feeds where brands spend a lot of time and a lot of dollars. And as the cost of attention is growing, the content in these feeds are becoming more unpredictable. So the question that I want to ask our panelists that we're framing this conversation around today is what happens when the algorithm rewards what brands can't control and what frequently they would like to avoid? So that's enough of me yapping. I'm going to introduce our lovely panel here. I'm joined on my right by Freddie Dabagi. I realize I didn't even ask you how to pronounce your last name, which is so rude. So
Dabagi.
Okay, Dabagi, who is Chief Transformation Officer at Crispin. So thank you for being here, Freddie. Jesse Earl, to my left, Associate Director of Best Friends Animal Society. So we love that. And last but not least, Sarah Larkin, VP of Sales at Silverpush. Thank you all so much for being here. So my first question, we're going to get right into the slop of it all, which is that we've all seen this hype around Fruit Island, and if you have not heard of it, well, I hope you have. If you have not, it's a slopified, fruit-forward adaptation of Love Island, which,
It gets sloppy.
Yeah, I will let you take that for what it is, but there's a lot of hype around it, and there are actually, like, engaged audiences like watching and consuming this content. So that's all to say that in a lot of places, the algorithm is rewarding this kind of content. So if considering that that's the case, are we asking brands to just walk away from performance or sort of just like learn to adapt to that norm? Or are we saying that like better placement will perform better? And I want to start with you, Sarah, because, you know, the place that you occupy in this ecosystem is unique. And, you know, I think it's probably your view that context could be the antidote to slop. So I don't want to speak for you. What do you think about this?
You did a great job. I appreciate that. You probably sound much smarter, but no. Yeah, I think in our case, one of the biggest things is we need to redefine what success and what performance actually means. Right? I think historically everybody says, oh, better performance equals, better performance. But the reality is, what are we asking our consumers to do? And I think when you're talking about contextually relevant placements, so whether that's AI generated or it's not, I think the reality is the placement is defined by the context and not necessarily the audience, right? The audience can be a very generalized, we're reaching Gen Z, or we're reaching animal lovers, right? But what does that actually mean? And so using the video itself as the source of truth in terms of what that context is I think what gets us away from some of that AI slop by definition. And then if there are brands that want to be around that, that's fine. They just need to know that they have to have their own, and I know Jesse we talked about this earlier, you have to have your own guardrails around what that brand's safety definition is for you, because every brand is so different.
I mean, that's a good segue for what I wanted to talk about next, which is sort of this, how you assess risk tolerance generally and across different channels. And the fact that just in the content itself, there are gradients of slop at play, which we've talked about before. Everything from Fruit Island to misinformation about global conflicts. X is such an interesting place, which we don't need to get off on that. But it's interesting to me that like X has posed such a brand safety risks for so many brands, but they have chosen to crack down on AI-generated content of the war in Iran. And anyways, I really should not talk about that. But if you want to talk to me about that afterward, I would like to. But I want to talk to you, Jesse, about, as the brand voice on on this panel, how do you think about evaluating risk?
I would say premium and what we lean into is our audience, and we are trusted with donor dollars to do the best we can to reach more people, and in our case, for the most part, our product is bringing people into our cause, making a donation, getting them to engage with us, to volunteer, adopt a pet, and so it's precious to us that each dollar performs as best as it can. So we will chase that audience more first and foremost, wherever they are. That said, we lean into machine learning. We trust the machine learning. We trust our agency partner that helps us keep an eye on our community standards across social, across programmatic, our exclusion lists, and we limit some of our placements, and we are willing to take on that risk, I guess, to some extent. And we were just talking about how people are going to be pretty understanding if we happen to appear next to, we don't mind a little fruit, Love Island, I guess, but, if we did appear next to something, inappropriate, if I did hear about it, they're forgiving, not thinking that we're targeting that, I guess, and we will just adjust our exclusion lists based on that. But ultimately, we go back to, well, is the audience performing? That's what would surface before anything.
Yeah, to that point, I understand what you're saying, that of course it's sort of like there's so many factors you can't control, especially through programmatic and open web stuff. But if you had to I just want to push a little bit, if you had to ballpark it, do you feel like there's some percentage of impressions that it's okay if 1%, 10%, is not the perfect placement?
I can't put a percentage on it. It's like if it's not working, we turn it off. And it's not too often that we're digging down into where did that placement land and what, we look at websites that haven't performed, publishers that haven't performed as well, and we'll add them to an exclusion list. But we don't break it out that way, per se.
Yeah. Freddie, I want to turn to you. You're at Crispin. Your team is responsible for managing budgets, and often not small budgets, millions of dollars of budgets. So, when a vendor or client comes to you and, just don't be next to the bad stuff. Don't show up next to the bad stuff. How easy is that? And where do you actually tolerate slop because it might work, because it is performant?
Yeah, I think there's the obvious, and then there's the gray area. And I think from the obvious perspective, there's clear places none of us want our content around. There's the brand safety. We all know where I'm going with that. Those are your clear exclusion lists. There's other places that are kind of a gray area. There's a lot of our advertisers that don't want to be on news, for instance, and that makes sense given your earlier comment. But I think there is this real reality, especially within social, where you don't know where your content is next to. If you think about your feeds, you see ads, and then you see Love Island or Fruit Island, you see local news, you see all these type of things. And so I do think there is this realm of how do you get a little bit more forensic, which is kind of where we are pushing partners to give us more of that transparency at a user level or a placement level than just a URL level. I think the real, though, is if it's working, it's working. And so I think there is this idea where some consumers are okay with AI slop. Some consumers, that is their entire feed. And if they're engaging with your content, they're purchasing your products, then I don't think it actually is that bad. But if you have a brand that is talking about skincare and all of the content is AI, then it does feel inauthentic to your brand. And so those are some of the conversations we have, especially from the creative side, of how should we be appearing in the industry and in the market, and how do we think about it, especially UGC, which is what we talked a lot about earlier.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that we really focus on is that contextual intelligence. So the idea that the content is king, right? So we're not looking at as much an audience necessarily. We're saying the eyeballs on the other side of the computer, of the phone, of the tablet, who are you? What type of content are you consuming? And then you're obviously leaned into that content, right? You've asked for that content because that's what's playing, and then you show a relevant message. That's that much more impactful, I think, for a brand, and some of that's harder to quantify, right? And I think so when I said at the beginning, we need to sort of rethink what performance means. It's making sure that you keep that brand sustainability, brand affinity, brand favorability, and you don't have questions or concerns or like, oh, that wasn't great. Because sure, we can all come back from that, but I think it's really important to avoid it as much as we can. And then I think the other thing, and Freddie and I spoke about this a little earlier, is it harkens back to the days of YouTube and UGC, right? So if anybody was around when YouTube started, brands were like, absolutely not. No UGC, I don't care. I don't want to be around it. It all has to be produced. And now the industry has pushed UGC to be better, right? And I think the same thing is going to happen with AI. I think those people that are true AI slop are going to be optimized out. People are going to be like, we don't want to be around that. Nope, but we're okay with, to Jesse's point, we're okay with some of it, right? To Freddie's point, and that's going to be what sort of bubbles to the top and becomes what people lean into. And so I think AI slop to a certain degree will take care of itself.
I also wanted to talk to you about something we were talking about backstage, which is like maybe AI can be the tool to defeat the bad AI. like what you are doing at Silverpush is like we were talking about how contextual is built on a history of machine learning. And what can you just tell our audience here like a little bit about what kind of technical advances are happening in your world that can actually help brands avoid this kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that originally Silverpush was sort of born out of figuring out a way to make YouTube advertising smarter, right? We said, here's an industry that needs to be more contextually relevant, and we need to use content as king, not just these generic audiences. I think that was sort of part one of who we are in our iteration. And since then, over the last 13 years, we have grown into more of an omni-channel approach where we're able to sort of shine a flashlight when you're talking about Meta, when you're talking about some of the online video, when you're talking about some of the CTV stuff even, and we're making sure that as we continue to grow, expand, and sort of refine our offerings, we're doing that along the same lines of what our consumers come to us and ask for. And I think that's what we're starting to hear more and more is, clients like Freddie that are like, hey, we need to push you to make us look smarter so that our clients are happy. And, so working really closely with our agency partners, with our clients directly and just saying, what are you looking to accomplish? And then we go back and ask our team, we need you to help, iterate these tools. We need to get smarter, whether that's analytics tools. We've got some really exciting stuff coming out in the second half of the year, around trending topics and making sure that we're able to activate against that correctly. So I think there's a lot that's still to be developed. And to your point, I appreciate you saying that. I think context is sort of going to be the central piece of how we get there.
Freddie and I were talking too about how this is reminiscent of early programmatic days when the debate was not about AI slop, it was between premium and remnant inventory. And the arguments eventually went away from that, again, about following audience. So I think it's just the new problem of today. And I mean, part of the reason I can't put a percentage on it is because, it's just not an issue for us yet. It doesn't mean it won't become one, but we've got some pretty broad exclusions, blocks. Like, we know where we belong and where we don't. Like, over the years, we've removed politics, religion, conversations that homeless pets don't need to be part of. And we're good with that. But otherwise, we fit into a lot of pictures. And I know this is more about, audience targeting, really, but as you mentioned, just AI creative too, and if it's of interest to anyone, I mean, we've made the call. Our brand integrity matters so much. It matters that you guys as donors and supporters know that we're taking care of real animals, and it's real animals that need help. This is we keep it fun and playful, but this is serious business, so you will not see us putting not real pets in a video creative. It will be a real pet that we enhance with maybe a little AI movement, but we're not going to start making up pet stories and things, and staying true to our brand integrity through and through, so other people can play with AI slop, but we'll use it to slightly enhance the real story, I guess.
Well, I love what you said because it needs to stay true to your brand, and there are going to be brands that are need to be boring online, need to be very much this. And like for our social clients, we're always pushing them with like, all right, your tone of voice for your brand pyramid is over here. On social, you can kind of go to this, but don't go over here. Just because you see X brand that is doing the crazy stuff on the internet doesn't mean you need to mock that or copy that. You have to say back to your brand. And honestly, I applaud you guys for taking that stance on AI. And I think there's a lot of brands that we're talking to. We're like, guys, you stand for sustainability, but you're asking us to do AI forward. You stand for beautiful skin, but you are asking us to go AI forward. And I'm excited for the days there's more brands like that are saying, yes, we will use AI intentionally, but not to sacrifice where we are as a brand.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say we work with a nonprofit, and we were talking about this backstage. I think one of the important things for them is, yes, you can lean into AI, but we don't want to talk about audience targeting for like somebody who's focused on history or they're a history lover, but the AI, somehow they get targeted as like, Thomas Jefferson fighting with George Washington. Like that's not the direction that they want to go. But if you're looking at true audience targeting, that would have qualified as historical, right, or history. And so staying away from that, staying true to your brand, but being willing to be a little bit edgy, I think is totally the direction we need to go.
Yeah. Something we haven't talked about that I'm just curious about, especially because you mentioned YouTube and UGC, is like the creator economy is, everyone in this room knows how important it is. How do you think about working with creators who might not be producing, let's say, Slop, purely AI generated stuff, but are you reevaluating how those contracts look or what they're able to produce in their own content if it's AI modified at all?
So we do a lot with influencers, and what we've actually done, so similar to Silverpush, we have a technology that actually goes through and monitors all of the social content against different brand safety pieces. And yes, there's going to be the obvious, I don't need someone going off on political or religion or any of those places, but the reality is if you look at all these people, their posts over the last 15 years, there's a lot of stuff out there. And so it gives us more of that opportunity to go post by post, what has been flagged by AI, and then can tell us, hey, this might be okay for a fitness brand, but not going to be okay for a legal institution or places like that. And then where the technology is getting strong enough where it's actually going into and looking into, is this actually AI created? And so in our contracts, we are starting to put in, if there's a brand that have a clear do nots, it's in our contracts. And that's what we brief them and say, you cannot use AI for this. But there are also going to be creators that are crushing it in AI, and that's the trend, and that's why we hire them. And so it goes back to exactly to your point on contextual relevance. Our job as an agent is to be matchmaking between the brand, what that brand stands for, the influencers, and then the placements behind them. And it all has to be, again, back to that brand pyramid, that brand ethos that you were talking about.
Best Friends has been around for about 40 years, and we care a lot about our brand integrity, and we're not going to ruin it overnight with some poor relationships. So we certainly do our best in the creator space, with celebrity partnerships, with corporate partners. We look into everything. We do our due diligence to try and explore that, but with creators, I think we try and give as much flexibility as possible, as long as those people share the same values. And, I just watched a talk where they were talking about giving the creator freedom to be themselves, and that's why you trust them with your message. But I mean, there are certainly orgs that we have turned down that would be really great to say yes to, that it's too risky. So
yeah, and I was just going to say, I think at Silverpush we do a lot of categorizing and contextualizing even those influencer pages, those content creators. We're looking at that, so we have our own sort of exclusion list that we won't even talk about or bid on before we ever put those into a campaign, right? So the same way that we're categorizing and contextualizing videos, we're also looking at those content or creator pages and making sure, is this channel legit? Does it actually have followers, or is it an AI generated channel that's not actually even really, there's no person behind it, it's just something that's driven views for whatever reason or went viral for some inexplicable reason. But I think that, again, context is kind of key for that, and making sure that it's an actual person is going to go a long way towards helping our agency partners.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I want to close on a kind of a lightning round, and I'm going to, even though it's impossible to project farther than maybe a couple days in this moment of AI acceleration we're living through, I'm going to nonetheless ask you to project. So fast forward, let's say 12 to 24 months. I just want your prediction on like what the media ecosystem, the slopification of the internet looks like then, and what point we're at then. So like, do we clean this up, or do we get better at making money in the mess?
I'd say, I think short term, I think we're due for a brand mishap. I think similar to the days of YouTube, we all had to learn the hard way. And so I do think, unfortunately, I would forecast that there's going to be something bad before it gets better. But I do think in 24 months, it's going to solve itself. I think to what you were saying earlier, I mean, algorithms and AI are human-made. We all make mistakes. It's going to get stronger. The creative is going to get stronger and be less sloppy. The targeting is going to get stronger and focus on content, not just audiences. So I do think it's a problem that will fix itself, but I think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, I think I agree completely. And like I said before, I think some of that AI slop is going to optimize its way out of here in the next 12 to 24 months, whether that's through, we hope not, some huge brand snafu, or it's through, just people stopping, they just don't put their money behind it anymore. One of those two things is going to say, okay, this swath of AI is no longer valuable to us as brand marketers. And I think that's going to eliminate, again, it's not overnight and it's not going to be inclusive, but I think we're going to see a lot less of that and a lot more of the well-produced, well-thought-out, well-intentioned AI. And I think that's going to be the difference.
Jesse?
I think we're going to be watching, learning, evolving. Maybe we stumble and fall. I'm honestly hoping we'll just learn from people with much bigger budgets than ours. And put ours together, or put ours to work a little more cautiously. But I'm not losing any sleep over it. I think you stay true to, it's how I live my life personally, professionally. You stay true to who you are, to our cause, what we're doing. We're focused on animals and our supporters anyway, and I think you can't lose in that scenario.
Okay, well, there you have it. Slop is solved, everyone.
Yeah.
So Jesse, Sarah, Freddie, thank you so much for your time. Thank you to our lovely audience here for being in Adweek House.